Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a chipper and jolly version of First Ring Daily.
Someday, not that we recorded the conversation we had earlier, because why would we? But I think people would be fascinated more by our offline conversations than our online conversations.
I don't think you're wrong. I'm just trying to make sure audio is actually recording because, you know why?
Brad was so upset by that, he walked out of the room.
But before we dive in, today's show is brought to you by Cloudberry Lab. Check them out at cloudberrylab.com/FRD and grab yourself a free trial offer before that offer goes away forever and back your data up just a little bit better. Speaking of things that aren't better, there's Paul Thurrott.
I think we both got our haircut. Ooh, and I can hear an echo. Oh, it stopped.
Uh-oh.
Here, let me just talk for a second. I don't hear it again. I think it's okay.
All right. Well, that's just fantastic because I have no idea why there would be an echo.
Yeah, that happens occasionally. There's nothing worse to me than the sound of my own voice, except for the sight of my own body. Put them together and it's yikes.
Yeah, well, if the audio is completely screwed up in this episode, we'll go back to plan A because I tried to go to plan B to make things a little bit easier. But you know what? That's the way the cookie crumbles. Oh, it's Tuesday. I'm on the Wednesday show notes. I'm like, why is all this old stuff?
I've done that.
Yeah, but why don't you just dive in here real quick, Paul, while I check something. Why does Android suck?
Why doesn't it suck would be a shorter conversation. No, I saw some interesting stuff about Android P, which is probably going to hit a developer preview sometime this month. Android typically does do that, according to the normal Google schedule, probably towards the end of the month. And there have been some reports from Mark Gurman and from others about what Google's goals are for Android P. And it's interesting because I think some of that stuff is internal to Google. I don't think they would ever express that they're trying to go after the iPhone X in particular, or against the iPhone market in particular, whatever. But that stuff is interesting to me to a degree, but I think there are bigger issues with Android that need to be addressed, and they're the same issues that had to be addressed with Windows over the years. They're some of the same issues that Apple is trying to address with iOS 12, I guess, or 13, coming up with the next two versions, which is just kind of what I would call quality. And, for all of the advances on the Android side of the fence, and there's some real innovation going on there, in particular from certain hardware makers like Samsung, it's hard to overcome some of the endemic problems with Android, which includes such things as the performance degradation over time, the fact that just security updates aren't even going out to a bunch of different phones. But there's something it's very interesting because this just came up recently. You're familiar with the game Alto's Adventures. It's one of those endless running games where you're skiing down
I actually really like it.
Yeah, it's a great game. It's actually on Windows Store, by the way, which is kind of crazy. The guys that make that app are Apple guys, like they're iOS guys. So when that app appears on other platforms, it's ported by partners of theirs. Like they don't actually do that work themselves. They're pure iOS guys. And so they just came out with a sequel to the game. It's on iOS first. Naturally, it'll be coming to Android eventually. And they were kind of talking about the differences between the iOS market and the Android market as they understand it. And so on Apple, those guys can sell their app for $5. It makes millions and millions of dollars. People have no problem buying that game. And that's what that market's like. It's kind of a premium market. There are kind of well-heeled customers there. No problems with that. But when they go to Android, what happens is they can't price their app like that. And so they looked at different models because I guess the issue on Android is, A, the people are much cheaper than Apple customers and tend to spend money less. And worse, if games are too expensive or apps are too expensive, people will just start pirating them. So what they do is the free-to-play model, where the game is free and they're in-app purchases, something they would never do on Apple. And people can pay in little tidbits over time if they want to get further in the game or to get further in the game more quickly or easily or whatever it is. And that's just the nature of that market. And so Google has this goal with Android P, apparently, to try to get that part of the market over to Android. And when you think about it, that's very similar to what Microsoft tried to do with Surface, right? Where they're, in that case, competing with the Mac. How do you make a market that has gone down market very badly, like Windows had because of netbooks and the race to the bottom, to go premium? Like, how do you make that switch? It's very hard to do. Google or Microsoft has been not super successful with their own PCs, but I think they've been very successful convincing other PC makers to pursue the same market and then sell bunches of computers in that market. So like HP, for example, Dell has done this with the XPS line. Lenovo's always kind of done this, but they have ThinkPad, obviously, X series in particular. So Google wants to do that for Android. And I don't know. The problem for Android is that they've really struggled. The Pixel hardware lineup has done very poorly, both from a unit sales perspective, but also especially in the most recent generation, from a quality perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of feel like they need to attack these endemic foundational problems first, in particular performance degradation over time.
Well, that will be interesting to see how they could try to get.
Yeah,
because I bought that game. It was $5.99. I actually play it all the time. It's a great little game, fun little music.
Yep.
It was $6. I don't mind buying games like that. And
right. Well, there's a new version out, and apparently it has all kinds of different environments and obviously different capabilities with regards to, I think you jump up and catch a balloon and stuff and fly along that way. There's all kinds of different stuff in it. So
I will more than likely buy it once I beat the first the first one. I think I'm already in like 4 hours for $6 and 4 hours of entertainment. That's pretty dang good. No complaints there. I'm trying to think of what would actually get me to. Well, I know what would get me to switch to Android would actually be iMessage. That's kind of the linchpin that keeps me stuck to iOS.
Yeah, right. So
it really
why
is.
on earth would Apple ever do that?
Yeah.
Allow you to switch in the other direction, which I think is probably why that hasn't happened, right? They often tout switcher data.
Mm-hmm.
They must have some data suggesting, in other words, why wouldn't you put iMessage on Android? I mean, I bet they have data that says if they did that, they would see switchers in the opposite direction.
Very well could. Although I'd still love them to bring it to the desktop, but that's a whole different.
Yeah,
that's a whole different.
Just
thing.
to the web, even if it could be universally accessible.
But then the problem is you could just pin it on Android.
No, that's a good point. Yep. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Interesting. You mentioned a little bit Surface. The embargo is finally up on this guy that is now off. This is the Surface LTE, and it is exactly like the Surface Pro that you have seen since, I don't know, last June, but with LTE. And the only two notable things are, one, this is using T-Mobile, and the LTE Advanced. I was getting as fast as 50 megs down, actually down here in my basement, which is actually pretty damn good. Battery life comes in about an hour less than the standard Pro when you're running only on LTE. So I'm getting about 7.5 hours out of pretty mixed usage out of the device. But other than that, still no USB Type-C, no Thunderbolt 3, obviously. And you can go read that on Petri, but it's a Surface Pro with a new data connection option, and that's it.
All right. It just echoed again. Curious. Let's see if it stops. Yeah, it stopped again. I wonder if it's something to do with switching back from you or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't talk a little bit.
I would have no idea why. I guess I'll have to listen to it on the post audio production to see if there's
voices in my head is what I'm trying to say. I don't need me in there too.
A couple other quick things. Cortana integration is coming to Outlook. I don't know why this didn't happen 3.5 years ago, but Outlook Mobile and all that stuff on your phone will now have Cortana integration, and I'm sure in a less annoying way than we all dreamed, but it will probably actually be very invasive, is my guess, if it's anything like Skype.
All right.
Yep. And here's a fun one for you, Paul. So Microsoft Teams, we're starting to slowly switch over. Paul, one day you will get invited, and trust me, it'll be the worst day of your life because half the conversations take place on Skype and the other half take place on Teams.
I was literally just thinking we needed another messaging solution so that the people we work with have another way they can reach us.
Well, fortunately, because there's
all the other ways.
There's guest access. Those other people can actually get into Teams. But here is the interesting conundrum. There is no way to change your audio settings in Teams unless you are in a call. Yeah. You'd think like even Skype, you just go to audio video settings and you can adjust things. Like, now I know it's not for everybody, but I have multiple microphones. Obviously, we have audio issues every third day here on First Ring Daily. That might even be generous. It's probably every day. And so what I was trying to do was to get Teams lined up with the audio mixer that I'm using, and I could not do it. And you can't change those settings unless you're in a call, and that includes the webcam and everything else. It is kind of blindingly obvious that should be there, but it's not.
This is going to sound strange at first, but I've been experiencing a similar issue with OneDrive when I configure a new computer, but it's not 100% of the time. So in the latest version of Windows 10, they have this thing called Files on Demand, right? The notion there is that you can see all of your files in OneDrive in File Explorer, and you don't have to sync anything right up front. Like you just see them all. You can go in and decide, what you want to sync. But it still supports the old interface in OneDrive settings where you kind of go through the folder tree and select the folders you want to sync. Like you can still do that. I don't want to see all of my OneDrive folders. The odd kind of side effect of them switching off placeholders years ago is that I've gotten used to this new way of just syncing what I want to, what I need. And so I have like a little work folder I use. In this case, it's called 2018-03 for March. That's my work folder for the month. When I'm done with it, I kind of archive it, whatever. And I have a couple of other folders I sync. But all I really need to look at in a OneDrive perspective on my computer is just that little set of folders. But I would say 50% of the time-ish, I don't know the exact figure, when I bring up a new PC, before I can configure those folders to sync, it already shows me the entire thing in File Explorer. And if I do that, I run into an issue which might be related to the thing you're having with OneDrive right now, by the way, sort of, which is, you're deleting files and waiting for it to clear out on the PC. I have to manually delete those folders from my PC, the ones that have already kind of synced a little bit, or, like the placeholder part. And it's actually like kind of a scary thing because I'm worried that I'm killing the original every time I do it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like on a couple of computers, I've synced so much by mistake because maybe I'm not explaining this clearly. It's not just placeholders. Like I go in and select the things I want to sync and then it starts syncing, but it syncs more than what I've selected. Like I think there's something wrong with it between Files on Demand and like old school sync. So I actually end up moving like huge chunks of data to my desktop for a little while just so I can go back later when it's all cleared out and look at it in the web and make sure OneDrive didn't screw it up, And I should add, one time it did screw it up. So anyway, it's kind of a nerve-wracking thing. But anyway, the reason that reminded me of this is what you're saying is you can't configure a call unless you're in a call in Teams. You can't configure this unless you've signed into OneDrive and are syncing. Like you can't go into it until you've already signed in with your credentials. Yep. What I want to do is sign in and have it not sync anything. Mm-hmm. I'm not. I would, like I said, about 50% of the time, that doesn't happen, and I have no idea why.
Yep.
Microsoft.
Yeah. So to kind of extrapolate on what Paul was talking about there, my issue was that I was over capacity. So then I deleted a bunch of stuff, or moved it actually, realistically moved it over to Google Photos. And now I have a bunch of free space, but my PC that I'm recording this podcast on is still saying, hey, you don't have enough space. And it's saying, we're not going to sync these folders. And I'm just sitting here waiting. I've rebooted a couple times and we just wait.
We'll get there.
Eventually. Maybe. Paul, it is approximately 53 degrees outside. I'm going to go play outside with a stick and a ball. What are you going to do today?
I'm going to arrange to have someone plow my driveway because we're about to get a foot of snow. And I just detailed how I almost died in a snowstorm last week. And it's happening again. I can tell you what I won't be doing over the next, 36 hours. And that's leaving my house. Doesn't mean I'm not going to die because of the storm, but if I do, it's going to be in my house.
Well, that is not good. Actually, we're supposed to get a little bit of rain, not snow, even anywhere close to that amount. I think they just said snow flurries, potentially. Yeah. But
yeah, this thing has escalated over time, which I don't appreciate. And as I expressed to my wife this morning, I have this vague hope that they can be wrong about this, right? Just like they were wrong with the last storm, but in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
That it could be like a mixture of rain and snow. It doesn't amount to anything. That would be wonderful.
Or a nice summer breeze just shows up instead.
I thought we were done. I really did. We had a good, 10 days maybe of reasonable temperatures into the 50s, even the 60s.
Yep. And here we are. You got anything else for today, Paul?
Yeah. How about you?
No, I appreciate you asking, Bill.
Okay.
So polite here. Just so polite. The podcast is going to end.
It's going to turn into like an NPR podcast where we just talk complimentary to each other.
Yeah, it's a compliment sandwich. Here's two nice things, and then it's going to end with Paul just telling him how much he hates me.
Right.
So,
all right. Would you like me to cut the crust off of your sandwich? Would that be good?
tell you what wasn't good was my daughter was throwing apples under the couch, which we learned about yesterday. Rather than
Yikes.
getting up and throwing the apple core away, she was just putting it under the couch. So that was
Right.
fun.
Now there's like mushrooms growing under there or something.
Mm-hmm. It was
Yeah.
great. It was great.
Kids are the best.
There were
I've always said
tears.
that.
There was crying. There was, a whole range of emotions you get out of a 4-year-old. But here we are. Anyways, folks, that wraps it up for today. Today's show is brought to you by Cloudberry Lab. Check them out, cloudberrylab.com/FRD for a free trial offer to learn how to back up your data to Azure, S3, Google Cloud, all that good stuff. And we'll catch you right back here tomorrow.